The Deputy Director of the Conservative Environment Network, an independent forum for Tories in the UK and around the world who support net zero, nature restoration and resource security, is John Flesher. John, you might be into all of that, but you haven't got a light. I can't even see your face, man. Are you all right?
I have got a light in here. It's not very bright though, is it?
Yeah, you see, you need more electricity. That won't be done by wind farms. Right, John, welcome to the show. Today, the Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, caught up, it seems, with Nigel Farage, and what most people in this country are saying, has said that Britain's key climate target of achieving net zero by 2050 is an abstract concept that should be abandoned. It seems, John Flesher, that even the new Tory leader has worked out that where we are as a country, with everything creaking and stretched, this is going to bankrupt the United Kingdom. It's going to cost jobs, and this obsession is not in the best interests of the British people. Surely you understand that.
I think I certainly understand it if we do it the wrong way. And I think I'd make a big distinction between net zero, which is a goal I think we need to reach, we should reach, and Labour's plans for getting to net zero, which I think will cause exactly the sort of problems you're talking about: rising energy costs, job insecurity. That's exactly the kind of thing we need to avoid.
Stop me there and help me. Treat me as a complete idiot, right? Just treat me as an idiot, because I am. We should reach it. Says who? Says who?
Says the International Energy Agency, say virtually all of the world's climate scientists, say the British people. I mean, you talked before and said that this was something that was unpopular. Show me the polls. Poll after poll, showing, including Tory voters, shows significant support for reaching net zero. What they want is the political class to work out how to do it properly and avoid those negative consequences.
So help me, and if I'm wrong, I'll put my hands in it. You're telling me that a majority of the British people support net zero?
Correct. You would struggle to find a poll that doesn't show that, and I would include just Tory voters in that. Reform voters, it's a little bit more of a complicated picture, but you would struggle to find a poll that doesn't demonstrate significant public support for this goal. But that support is only, I don't take that for granted in the slightest, that support is only going to be meaningful if we can maintain it by doing it in the right way. And that's why I really, really hope Kemi Badenoch is going to be able to set out.
What is right? Because I'm here to be educated. I think it's the biggest con trick. I think it's an absolute joke. 1% of carbon emissions, the rest of the world doing whatever. And you're smiling, but this country, most of our public services, most of what was any good in this country is creaking, and we're spending billions of pounds for what? Just explain to a complete Neanderthal. Why is Donald Trump not right? Drill, baby, drill. Why are we putting up wind farms that don't create enough electricity, and then we have to import it from other countries, and it costs? And by the way, all the people, I mean, you say this government got it wrong, but energy bills are going through the roof. It doesn't make sense at this moment, does it?
But energy bills are going through the roof for a variety of reasons, not all of which are connected to net zero. Let's not forget that 97% of time, the wholesale cost of energy is determined by gas, which is what net zero seeks to displace. So energy bills are driven by a number of reasons, including some policy costs I fully accept that are related to the effort to decarbonise. But the biggest cost of your energy bill is the wholesale price of energy, which is determined by gas, not by renewables. So I do think that's important. You raised the point quite rightly that this isn't just about what the UK is doing. We are only 1% of emissions, and it matters hugely what other countries do. But a large number of other countries are signed up to this target in one form or another.
But that's another, mate, with respect, that's another line. Like, we should reach, a large number of countries are signed up to it. Decarbonise the UK. Explain to me, a taxpayer, right, why I should look at billions of pounds being spent on decarbonising the UK because some body, some climate group tells me when pensioners are freezing, veterans are on the streets, farmers are having their land grabbed, our NHS is on its backside, people can't get a doctor's appointment. That, I'm just being honest, and I love a debate, that for me is priority, not something that even your leader is now saying is not achievable. That's my issue here.
No, and I fully understand where you're coming from. Those things absolutely should be priorities, but we have to consider all of this. Not pursuing this has a cost as well. Climate change isn't just something that we can ignore and hope it goes away. There isn't, Kemi Badenoch's made a great thing about telling the truth, and I think that's really important because I think for far too long, politicians have shirked away on a whole range of issues, from levelling with people and being straight with them over it. The single best truth I can tell you about climate policy is there are no cost-free options. If you want to not pursue climate change and not pursue the costs that you highlight, what do you think the cost is going to be when we have massive migration, increased driven to this country because of climate instability overseas? What's
Right, well,
going to be the
hold
impact
on,
on
hold on
food
a second. Now you've done it again. But you've done it again. If we don't spend billions we haven't got, because we can't even service the interest on the trillions we owe. You've just said, if we don't invest in climate change, more migration is going to happen because people are going to come from other countries because we're all right and they're having a nightmare. In layman's terms, yes?
I think that's one of the big impacts.
Well, I'd shut you. You won't like this. You'll probably put the phone down. I'd shut the bloody borders, man. I would. This is exactly what's wrong with this country. I really would.
Fine, but you can't insulate yourself from every effect of this. What's the impact on food prices going to be if the food that we're importing from overseas, which we still import a lot, and I suspect
if you and your people, if you and the climate lobby are so, why don't we drill? Why don't we use our natural oil and gas reserves? Explain that to me.
I don't have a problem with us using our natural oil and gas reserves, but we have to live in the context that those oil and gas reserves in the North Sea are declining and have been. We haven't been a net exporter of energy in this country for over 20 years.
Even BP 2 weeks ago, who came out as green 5 years ago, one of the biggest providers, BP, said this is a joke, it's costing too much money, and they have reined back. Do you understand? And I understand there are arguments on all sides, but when you talk about nature restoration, resource security, all those sorts of things. I'm simply just talking from, without being disrespectful, from the everyday person's mindset here. You hear about Ed Miliband with his band of committees of all these these intelligent people. I'm talking about Beryl in Bury, who's worked for 50 years, has paid her stamp, is cold, can't see the doctor. I don't know how many times I have to tell academics this. She doesn't give a toss about net zero. She doesn't. She cares about surviving right now. And that, for me, means that we have to understand that. And we're not. And if you say to me, yes, those things do need... We haven't got the money, mate. And it's like anything. It's like I keep going on about the overseas budget, the foreign aid budget. Sorry, but you need to look after the things that need looking after. And if the argument to not make these changes is, oh, well, lots of migrants will come here. Well, I'm sorry, I can't, and I probably sound unfair in all of this, but I think we need as a country to get our priorities right. And our priorities should be the people in this country rather than chasing some ideology that right now we can't afford it. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe you're right, maybe a large percentage of this country want this, but I don't believe they do.
I'm not disputing the fact, and you spoke about Beryl in Bury. Beryl in Bury cares about things like her energy bills and her food bills. Let's consider what happened to her energy bills 2 years ago when the gas price spiked because being overly reliant on gas means that it can be controlled by dictators like Putin, manipulating gas prices and selling them through the ceiling. Because we were reliant on gas, even with our own reserves, those bills went through the ceiling, and that had a real impact on her. Her food bills are going to go up if we have to if we can't import food as easily from overseas.
Well, hold on a second. Why don't we stop land grabbing and get... our farmers are being screwed by the Labour government, and they're the ones that provide the food for us. So I'll tell you what, let's build some wind farms. Let's increase a tax on farmers, which is it's just the most unbelievably stupid thing in the world. These people aren't minted. What?
By the way, I'm not disagreeing with that. I completely agree.
And let's force them out of business so we can build wind farms which don't create enough electricity, and then we'll import it. That argument doesn't wash at all, pal. The way they're treating farmers who provide the very food that you just said is disgraceful. I just... Look, in an ideal world, we would make sure all our services were working. We'd make sure that ordinary everyday people who are struggling are okay, and we do right by the environment. It's a bit like the migration problem, in my humble opinion. Great Britain's always the one that's, let's behave morally, let's bring people in, yep, let's look after the environment, yep, let's do this, this, and that. Is not the reality right now, John, that this country is skint? And when you're skint, or brassic, or whatever you want to say, or broke, your priorities have to change. And the people who pay, I think, should be at the front of the queue. I really do.
I don't dispute the fact that with those issues are major problems. I really do want to pick you up on the farming thing. I agree completely on farming. And I think you've served to underline in this. Let's not elide net zero with Ed Miliband's pursuit of net zero. They are not the same thing. And the whole thing that I really, really hope Kemi Badenoch can get onto with what she's trying to set out, which I think is absolutely the right approach. Let's come up with a plan, but let's come up with a plan that does it and takes into account what you've described, because that is not the same as the Labour government's approach. And I'm certainly not here to defend what Labour is doing at the moment. But you say we're skinned and we have got enormous challenges to our public finances. My counter to that is not to disagree with the premise of what you're saying, but to say that abandoning climate action, abandoning doing this stuff is going to make us more skinned. This is not a separate question. I'm not living in a moral land where you're living in a practical land. On a moral and a practical level, this stuff really, really matters. We've just got to make sure we do it in the right way.
John, it's really good to have you on, mate. Really, really interesting conversation and very much appreciate your time. John Fletcher, Deputy Director of Conservative Environment Network.